coming to our alignment technical seminar. It's been a few years since we've actually had a seminar. It's probably been a couple of years, but COVID seems to have just made everything feel like it's gone a lot longer. I want to thank you all for coming, of course, and congratulate you because you clearly are interested in things that matter when it comes to sports cars, right? But that means you're also a bit of a nerd, okay? And that's okay because I'm the president of that club, all right? Those of us who really are interested in these type of aspects, we kind of geek out on these things, right? Because this is one of the fundamentally most important upgrades or modifications you can make to a car. Okay, a proper alignment goes a long ways. And believe me, I'm the guy who's developed hundreds of parts for these Lotus and other cars, right? I sell all sorts of mods, but you'll see, we're on record saying, hey, the first mod beyond safety that you should do to your car is get a proper alignment. Okay, so having said all of that, I'm super honored and really happy to have the guys, the team from Hunter here. We've got Dave, we've got Bill, we've got Bob, who are going to talk about alignments and discuss what is important about them so you guys have a better appreciation for why it is so important to your performance car. Whether you're driving a sedan or a sports car, alignments truly matter. Okay, so welcome, and I'm going to leave the floor to the Hunter guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shanu, and thank you everybody for coming. It is, you mentioned that you're a nerd about cars and stuff, and you're nerds about alignment. So it's interesting to see that this many people want to listen to what we have to talk about as far as alignment goes. And I'm not just because I'm biased, Shanu, but I too believe that the alignment is, if you gave me one thing to do to a car, we all had similar cars, and we were going to go race them right now. Set up a chassis. That's a big deal. Different things make different impacts on a race car and on the everyday daily driver type of car, right? So we're going to chat about that a little bit today, as well as what you should expect when you go to an alignment shop, what to look for, what's important. Before that happens, we only have one commercial today, and it's about 2 minutes long. It's not even a commercial. We are proud to say that we build everything that we have here in the United States, and this is our 75th anniversary in the United States doing this kind of stuff. So we have a cool little 2-minute video that we'd like to play, give you a little bit more background on Hunter and what we're all about and what drives us to do what we do. So enjoy this, and then we're going to get into angles and just cool stuff. So we're really super proud of that. Just a quick little bit of trivia. We're world known for alignment and balancing and engineering from that standpoint. But where Hunter started was there was a challenge. They used to have to take this huge battery out of a car in order to charge it for days. We Hunter built one of the first machines to charge a battery when it was still in the car. Take it for granted now, right? You get these little power packs that you can jumpstart a car with, and the challenge then was how can you charge a battery without taking it out of the car? And the battery probably weighed, what one of these Lotuses weigh. So let's start first of all what you should expect when you get to an alignment shop. But the way I'm going to start with that is start with some of the grassroots parts of doing alignment. So anybody use strings and camber gauges to set their car? I know you have, right, in your garage type of stuff. You have, yeah, so you know what that's all about. And then there's other ways of doing it where we can use tools like this. This is put on a vehicle in place of a tire, right? And there are some cases when that's kind of cool because you can get the measurements that you need to make inside of that wheel well that's kind of tight. The difference though between this and a tire is you got compliance in the tire and stuff. So you've got this just kind of sitting flat and making your adjustments. Is it a way to get it done? Sure. Is it a way to get it done with the strings and camber gauges? Yep, that's a way to do it. But there's so many other things that you can do as far as setting the vehicle when you get it into a proper alignment shop. You know, where you can get the vehicle up on a rack like this, inspect the vehicle, make sure all the components that you put on there, you may have upgraded some of the components, make sure everything's good and tight, do a little shakedown, and then go ahead and get the sensors. You can begin with just trying to get the car on the rack, right? Some of your vehicles hang a little low. You'll notice, here's a good example of what we do. We put a double set of approach ramps on there. All we're looking to do is just make that a little more gradual, a little more slow. Another way that you'll see alignment racks sometimes is actually mounted in a pit. So we'll put them in about a 12-inch pit. That way you're basically just driving flat on, no problem whatsoever. So step one is we don't want to damage the car, just getting it onto the alignment rack before we even do the alignment, right? So we do that. And then the next step after that is what kind of equipment do they have, and what kind of shape is that in? Is it the latest and the greatest, or is it something that's been around for quite a while? And a couple simple little items that can affect what happens to your car are just the way that we put the tires on, right? So David, I'll have you, if you could just take this one here first. You'll see some of this. This is probably a little more standard out there, although we're doing our best to change the market.
See these metal spades, these fingers that have to go in between the wheel and the tire. This is kind of this is still around. This technology is still very, very prevalent in the industry. But it's not the most efficient, it's not the safest for your wheels. These metal spades can very often leave marks on your very expensive rims. And it takes a lot more time. You're setting diameter. It's not the most efficient setup in the world. So definitely, if you do go get an alignment somewhere and this is their technology, just make sure you're watching your wheels.
Yeah, and if you don't know that that's their technology, well, you may know when you get the car. Because it'll have 4 identifying marks on each wheel. Because if you look at some of your wheel and tire combinations, especially the one that's right in front of Chanute there, I challenge you to try to get those spades in between that wheel and this tire. And I'll tell you a dirty secret on how they do it. Yeah, I mean, they get the clamp close and then they start banging on it until they get a little bit of contact with the wheel, and then they tighten it down. So now I think it's going to show you, this is kind of a new technology that's out. I think we've been in this path about 8 or 9 years. So your chances of making it to an alignment shop that's got this are pretty good. Probably at least 50%, if not better. But the only thing we're concerned about here is what kind of condition this face is in, right? Because that's all that sets against your actual wheel itself. But no spades, nothing to kind of have to jam in there, and just go ahead and set it down on there, and that's what holds it in place. As you can see, Chanute's got his car all set up here. So that's protecting the wheel. It's quicker and easier for the mechanic to use for real. And then it takes kind of a 3D picture of what we have as far as camber, caster toe, and all those measurements that are in there. Okay? Another thing that you want to be concerned about is just kind of like what kind of software they've got going on. You know, if it's an older machine, it may not have some of the later specifications in there. And if you can find a shop that can help you with your own specifications. I mean, how many guys do track days? A fair amount. I mean, it's not like you're at a Toyota meeting here, right? And you got just a daily driver. You guys you bought a performance car, you want to get a lot of performance out. Because it's a performance car, typically on the Lotus, the settings that are there are pretty reasonable if you want to track it. If you want to get a little more out of it, maybe you don't have enough grip in the front, or something's going on, you can make some adjustments. If you get to a proper alignment shop, they can help you with that. Okay? Or you may have your own ideas where you go in and say, hey, I want a little more negative camber in the front. Reason being, and does anybody know? It's all it's about. I mean, if the tire is, if the tire's setting up straight like that, 0 camber, right? And we drive this thing full force into the corner, and we start to load the car, and we get this, how much contact action do we have? Sometimes 25%. I mean, you're trying to race this car on the edge of the tire. So to his point, if we can put a little negative in that, right, And now, between the way the car reacts when you turn it anyway, because when you turn it, you're going to gain a little camber in it anyway and load the car. Now we have a good contact patch. And you'll know when you don't have a good contact patch. Because I've taken a road car on, say, like Button Willow, and you're trying to drive it in hard into a corner, and what do you get? You get this, and you are still going straight. You know, and it's just that between the speed and the weight of the car, you've overcome what that contact patch can hold. Okay? So you have a couple of choices. You can set your car up with the help of a professional to get, you know, that negative camber in there, and don't daily drive it, right? Because if I give you that negative camber and you daily drive it, what do you get? You're going to wear out the tire, right? So you see where there's this kind of balance between, you know, daily driving and getting it on the track and changing those angles. Now, at a performance shop that is geared or nerded towards a little of the performance end of it, there are ways inside the Hunter alignment machine where they can save specifications. Okay, what's your first name?
Craig.
Craig? So it could be in there under Craig's Lotus Button Willow setup, where they can save it, and that's a service that they can do for you. You're gonna, is most everybody from this area, or did you travel in a little bit? If you're not in this area and you don't know Chanute and you gotta poke around a little bit, you gotta find some people that are really geeked out about trying to make that happen. You know, where they'll save specifications for you. If you happen to daily drive the car also, they can put it in daily drive mode, I guess you would call it. And then you can come in and say, hey, I'm doing a Speed Ventures thing or something at the track, and I want to go ahead and set it up for the track. You know, and you can dial in for you in that way. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, right? So that just kind of bounced into that for a second. You can take that.
Sure.
So those are the things. So make sure they got decent software so that you're getting the angles set the way you want it, and they got decent equipment so you can manage the car before you even start adjusting angles. So when it comes to angles, everybody kind of familiar with camber, caster, toe? Camber's tipping in from the top, in and out. Caster tipping this way, correct? Does everybody know which way positive camber is, or caster? It's hard. So, I mean, camber is easy, right? Yeah, we got negative, we got positive, it's all pretty easy. Toe is tipped in this way and that way, right? So I usually do a demonstration. I didn't get myself set up, but I take a broomstick and I would ask you for a $20 bill, right? And I tape it to the broomstick, right? And I hold it straight up and down. If I tip that away from me, that's a bad thing, right? Because I'm not getting $20. That's negative. Do you remember that? All right. What if I tip it this way? That's positive. And then usually at that point in the demonstration, I rip the $20 off and I put it in my pocket and try to get away with that. But camber and toe for most of us, and even myself when I first started, it's pretty easy, right? And frankly, in many cases, those are the things that we can adjust, right? You did yours in your garage. Did you do anything with the caster? No. You can't even necessarily measure it in a garage type setup, you know. So, but camber and toe, we all know what to kind of do with that. So when you get into caster, we actually have a step in here where we used to turn it 20 degrees each direction. Now we have faster caster, and now it's like 10 degrees each way, right? So but what we're looking for is we're looking for the change in camber as we make that sweep, right? There's a static way to measure it, but it ain't easy, you know. But basically, it's the line through the lower ball joint and the upper ball joint, and that's how you get. So this is going to be the test cast. So that's how you get what kind of caster. This one. Positive. What kind this one? Negative. Okay, 50-50 chance. I knew you guys would do it. So if you think back to like prior to power steering, for example. We put more negative caster in. Why is that? It's easier. It makes the steering light, right? And you have no power assist, so you got to do something to kind of make it a little easier to drive it. Now we have power steering. The problem is when you make the steering light to turn, how does it perform? Usually not well. And it doesn't feel good, you know what I'm saying? So if you make that positive caster get a little more heft to the wheel, if you would call it that, a little more feel, it's a much better situation, okay? So with the advent of cars and things change, actually is a caster on some new cars, caster on the rear. Obviously you can't swing it, right? It's a how you determine it. You have to use a stationary measuring device to do it. What that caster was, why they began to build that into it, it was a Corvette that they started messing with it, was because if you're coming up and over a rise and the car gets light, right, then it makes the back end of the car not feel good. It makes it feel like maybe you don't have it. So they made some changes in that to try to do it for performance.
So is the main benefit of positive casting is the steering feel, right? You've got more ability to turn the car and it's not right in time. Stick dial in more, is that what it is?
A couple things. Steering feel is one of them. Returnability of the steering wheel is another. And then kind of what is the angle of the tire when I'm in a full turn? So how much positive camber do I have when I make that turn? Because we don't need a lot of positive camber on the inside tire, because that's not where our load is, right? Our load is on the outside tire, so it helps load that tire. Now I have good grip, and now I can make the point. Does that make sense? So, and just another kind of interesting fact, has anybody driven a go-kart? Solid rear axle? Can't turn it around in this space, can you? No, it just wants to drive forward. So my son has been racing go-karts since he was 9. So the first thing you learn about caster is you get a 4-wheel go-kart, and when you turn it like this, and it loads down into the front, it makes the right front, it makes the left rear light. I don't mean light, I mean off the ground like that. So now you can make it turn, okay? And it also gives you good grip in the front. Does that make sense to you? Okay, cool. Any other questions on caster?
Maybe I can make a couple of comments.
Yeah.
In the context of Lotuses, you go to full caster or full positive caster, the car is way more stable at high speed. But in the parking lot maneuvers, the steering effort is dramatically higher.
It's like you shut the car off. I mean, it's just super, super heavy.
Is there much adjustability in these? How much
So,
caster can we adjust?
So you have the shims, and that's all you got, right? And then it's fixed at that stage.
So they engineer the car, they build the car, and they put it kind of in the middle, and they give you a little leeway one direction or another. In most cases, in a performance car, whether it's caster or even sometimes camber, it's not enough movement, right? So then you end up maybe getting redesigned control arms and stuff like that gives you a little more leeway. But what does it give you on the daily driver? It's not necessarily where you want to go. Okay?
We had a caster demonstration. I was looking for a hand part, but this is the best I could get. So if I barely bring lower ball joint as the wheel, upper ball joint as my hand, if I have it fairly negative, I can turn this thing really sharp. If I put it out like this, it's going to keep going. That's so a lot of your Mercedes have a lot of caster, so they just plow through the road. Delivery trucks set them very negative. Somewhere in between is where. That's the best definition I can give of caster. And if you get a hand cart way out in front of you, it just wants to keep going.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, Bob. Another thing caster will do for you specifically positive is absorb what you're hitting into, kind of the feel of the road, bumps and just pavement grooves and stuff like that. It's easier, it feels better to the customer that they're driving the car to have that positive. Okay?
Yeah, one of the cool advantages of having this tool is that we're now going to get to experiment exactly with that and look at the full range and try to come up with some qualitative, answer to each one of those settings.
Yeah. What's good on a track and what's not good on a track? I mean, and where are you testing it? It's an off-camber corner, you're fighting gravity anyway. If it's a nice flat corner, that's probably the best place. And if it's dished or banked, that's a whole different thing because you're really compressing the car. But as you continue to kind of play with it, you know, I mean, I think you have a good center of information here, but we've got, you know, 15 or 20 geeks in here now, right? So if y'all try something or test something, you'll begin to realize what's better for the car, and then just save it in the alignment machine so that you can come back to it. Because you don't want to get lightning in the bottle just once. You want to always make sure you're able to go there, right? So, what tracks do you guys that track where you go typically? Streets of Willow? Yeah. Okay. Button Willow is a good one too. The car will end up dirty, but at least you have less chance of hitting something really hard. So we tend to take new drivers there because we come back in the car. So my son was actually driving a Pro Formula Mazda open wheel car and hit a jackrabbit with Tanner arms that come out and cut it right in half. It went down the chute, which is where the radiator is. So by the time he came in, that was nuts. But again, you spin, you wipe out, you don't hit the wall, you know. And it can be a lot of fun, you know. These cars are really pretty interesting from the standpoint of they're very easy to understand the adjustments on it. You know, I mean, you look underneath these cars and it's got adjustable rods to move things where you want to move them. Play with the camera a little bit. Tow, I mean, it's not a whole lot to play with there because you go too far one way or the other, and then it just becomes a really twitchy car when you're trying to, you know, and it's uncomfortable. Usually zero to maybe a little bit out on it, you know. So, but start at zero and see where it goes. You'll gain more from doing some caster and especially some camber. Camber's my favorite move. I don't know if it's because it's easier or because I understand that you need to have the tread patch on the ground in order to steer this thing. So, okay. How are we doing so far? All right. There are many other angles in there, you know, between the scrub. Anybody understand what scrub radius is? That's where the contact patch of the tire should be. But what happens, let me tell you what affects it the most, is sometimes you see people will put maybe a different offset wheel on the car. So now all of a sudden, the center contact patch of the tire is out a little further than it was originally designed. Probably not. There would be some performance issues there, but it's extremely hard on the car because we expected the contact patch of the tire to be here because of the distance and the leverage it puts on the front end parts and stuff. And if you move that out, just using this as an example, that leverage is bigger and stronger, and it's tough on parts. It's tough on the car. And frankly, in most cases, you really don't gain anything over what it's originally designed. You see these cars on roads all the time, you know. Or even think about four-wheel drive cars or trucks where they put the big tires, wide offset and all that. I mean, when I was in the business, I loved those trucks because they usually meant 4 ball joints and a couple of other things. It's just too hard on it, you know, the bearings, everything. Yep. It's not supporting the car. Weight, do you guys do much with weight distribution on the car?
Sure. So the corner balancing.
Yes.
Yeah. So for that, the white race car out front, we just corner balanced, and the boys got that dialed in perfectly a couple weeks back.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have scales, so we corner balance.
It's a great idea, and usually that's one thing that lasts a little longer. You know, when we're talking about moving the alignment around and testing and stuff. Get the car ready first. You know, make sure that we're not trying to work with camber to get a good footprint on a turn, and we've got the weights imbalanced, you know, and that's what race car drivers call it, the car's imbalance, you know? And that can be there's too much grip in the front, not enough grip in the back, and there's reasons for that. So we want to get the car in balance first. Okay? Any other questions?
Is the rack, what about ride?
That's important as well. For testing it or for measuring it?
Yeah, like what does it allow you to?
Yeah. The biggest reason it gives you an opportunity to do that is because we're working with a perfectly flat surface. We can get the vehicle up where it's easy to measure. Ride height is really, really important. Because again, we're talking about transfer of weight and how we're driving the right front tire in or the left front tire, all that kind of stuff. And if you're starting like this, I mean, that's not a good situation. So I would think, and part of counterbalancing the car is making sure the ride height is right. Because you could pop a car on there that's not, the ride height's all jacked up all around, and the corner balance is going to be off. I mean, from Lotus, it's probably decent to begin with, but then you've got to do some work to get the car corner balance properly.
Yeah, I mean, with any transverse mounted powertrain, right, you're always going to have a bit of a challenge with corner balancing. This car, for example, the powertrain is longitudinal, and so corner balancing this car is so quick and easy. Every other transverse mounted engine car that we've done takes a lot longer. And ironically, you start with your ride height correct, but to corner balance the car, in the case of these cars, you end up jacking the ride heights. So effectively, to get that 50% cross weight, you're going to end up having ride heights that are different. But that's the only way to basically shift the weight temperature gradient across the carcass of the tire. So to truly figure out what your camber needs to be, you would measure it at the track, right? You'd go do a couple of hot laps, come into the pit, and have somebody measuring your tire temperatures. So this is where we start to nerd out even further, right?
Yeah.
This is getting very esoteric for street cars, okay? But this is to really optimize a race car or to really lower your lap times. That's what you have to do. So you're literally going to have a different camber setting per track that you're at, depending on the number of right-hand turns versus left-hand turns, that sort of thing. But what we try to do is just say, hey, look, here's a general good camber number to run on the street as well as on the track. If you're truly getting to that next level and you're racing the car and you want to absolutely optimize it, then you have to really get yourself a little pit crew to take the proper measurements to really make those type of adjustments.
And across the tire, you'll see some differences.
Absolutely.
I mean, you'll be like, oh. But to go back to your first question about corner balancing for a certain track, that's the problem, is you got 15 or 16 turns. So maybe you gain in 3, and the other 13 are just a mess to try to drive through. Because we do that with go-karts. We change the ride height in the front because of a critical turn that may come onto a straightaway.
Yep.
Right? And straightaway in a 20 horsepower go-kart is important. So for you probably want more balance throughout the course and you'll be fine. And then just be better. That last corner that comes onto the straight at like Laguna Seca, drive it perfect. Because these aren't high horsepower, right?
No.
I mean, you can't carry the speed through that last corner. You're going to be banging on his door telling him you need more horsepower in the car. You probably don't. You just got to get through the corner and carry that momentum so that you take advantage of the full straight. The guy that can't get through the corner, he only gets this straight. So it just won't wind up that fast. Okay? So, but that's getting tricky. They do that with ovals. I mean, if you took an Indy car and you set it down flat, there's not a lot of balance to, say, the left front wheel. For example, they typically put a loose bearing on the inside. You know, they engineer it. It's just along for the ride. All right. And where's the Hinchcliffe guy? Here in the back. Yeah. So, I told him he's got to get a new shirt. My son go-kart raced with Paddle Award and Alabraski. So I think Paddle is going to be the champion this year.
He's coming close.
So
Coming close.
that's kind of my prepared remarks. Did I miss anything? Remember, I'm counting on you to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's great.
Because I get down some rabbit holes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, are there any other questions that you guys may have?
And don't be bashful. I mean, because that's why we're all here.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably no answer to this, but how often should you get your car like that? I just had mine aligned after 5 years. I can tell you 5 years is too long because of the night-and-day difference. But I mean, I guess it depends what you're using it for. Condition of the road.
If you're just a passenger guy, you don't just drive back.
Or like, let's say a performance car, like our cars, where maybe you're doing 2 or 3 track days a year, maybe you're doing the canyons. I mean,
You do a track. This is what I would do. So if I'm doing a track day, I'm going to go and spend the money and travel to Laguna and do a track day. I'm going to set it up before I go. I'm going to check it when I come back. Have you guys hit rumble strips before? They're not. They look cool on TV, but you know it when you're on it, right? And the fastest way is the curves.
Sort of that's like hitting one of those curves could knock out your toe, your hand, your camber, or something.
Very easy. Very easy. They're a small. They're a light car. Their components are built to be strong, but you're putting it at optimum speed, optimum G-force, and then you're going across those curves, right? We on a race car, we were checking it in between every session. I was telling Shanu because we use strings on IndyCar stuff, so that's not really fast. You gotta get it down there, right? You gotta make sure it's all that set. But at one time, I took one of these to Laguna Seca, and I'm trying to race my kid's car, and I could have done 15 laps that day, just having that there. Oh my God, but I mean, if you're looking for racing and competition, you're going to check it out every session. If I'm just taking my car to the track, I'm going to check it out before I go, and check it out when I come back. You'd be surprised what gets broken, loosened, or bent that you didn't even know. Like, I didn't even hit it.
Yeah, and that's obviously if you have the equipment to do it yourself, right? You can do it before and after. But for most people that might be doing 2 or 3 track days a year, I would encourage you to do it once a year, once every couple of years, right? It's like brake fluid. You should probably bleed your brakes after every track day. But most people don't. So then I say, listen, at least try to bleed them once a year. Flush them for sure after 2 years. But our tires, usually the rears, right, on a new car, typically with an arc compound tire, you're going through 2 sets of rears for every set of fronts, right? So 3,000 to 5,000 miles, unless you do burnouts and crazy stuff, but generally speaking, that's the kind of mileage you're going to get on it, and that's probably a smart time to consider, an alignment at minimum. You're putting fresh tires on it. Let's just make sure your toe's right, and things, you'll get optimal wear from the tire, right?
Yeah, at a minimum, you're protecting your investment.
Yeah.
You just bought 4 new tires for the car. That's a no-brainer. Yeah. Anybody have strings and gauges at home other than you? I had a chat with him before we started, so. and my buddy with the arrow shirt. So,
Well, things, for example, like on the Lotuses, the easiest thing, like from a camera perspective, is to pull all the shims off the front. Whether you've got strings or the ability to align your car now, that's a simple way to add performance to the car at really no cost. It's 2 bolts to yank out, right? Pull all the shims, including the one that holds the ABS sensor, and you immediately will get some additional negative camber, which will benefit that car, right? So you don't need any sort of alignment equipment to do that, right? It just assumes that you've got average mechanical skills. If you don't, leave it to a professional, please, okay? Because it's a dangerous part of the car. If you don't do that right, you could die, right? So.
Plus, you show up at the alignment shop after that weekend, 2 handfuls of shoes and go, "Did you put these back?"
Yeah.
But if you take them out, like he says, if you pull them out, I mean, it's just a quick, easy change. Bam. So it's going to go like that, right? And when you're done, put those same shoes back in.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, I mean, Lotus has to deliver a car that's going to work for a broad audience. So they're always going to make the car handle a bit more conservatively than maybe many of us would like the car to behave, right? And so a lot of what we recommend, in particular with the alignments that we typically recommend and do for our clients, makes the car a little bit more neutral. Okay, so what does that mean? Right, a manufacturer delivers cars that understeer. That's safe, right? You want to see what you crash into. All right, that's understeer, right? So we try to go and deliver cars that are a bit more neutral. Okay, so that means the rear is going to start rotating around a little bit more than it would in a stock manner. And that's good for enthusiasts. It's not so good for the average person out there, right? And so that's something obviously to be aware of. And as you're talking to the person that's doing your alignment, let them know that how do you want the car to behave? What are you looking for? The professional drivers, guys who are really good, they like their cars to rotate on demand, okay? That takes an advanced level of skill to really want a car that behaves that way, because that will scare a lot of average drivers for sure. Certainly it'll scare beginning enthusiasts and even some intermediates, okay? Because that means the car is absolutely going to rotate anywhere and everywhere you want it to. But that's how pros put their cars exactly where they want on the track. Because when you're actually racing, you're not always on the most perfect, line on the track. So you've got to accommodate, right? And there's this thing called racecraft. So your ability to put the car where you want while you're in a crowd of other cars is key, right? But what I would say to you is certainly talk to your alignment person about what you're looking for from the car, and they should hopefully be able to give you some ideas on what they recommend as far as the best, way to set the car up. And of course, thank you to Dave, Bill, and Bob here for coming in and giving us this seminar. So thank you so much, guys. Okay, thanks.